Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, the most expensive street in America, luxury retailers, gleaming towers, and the wealth of nations concentrated in a single corridor. But in 1926, one of the grandest mansions ever built on this street was demolished. Not because it was old or unfashionable, not because it had fallen into disrepair, but because maintaining it had become more expensive than destroying it. The Cornelius Vanderbilt II mansion occupied an entire city block, the largest private residence ever constructed in New York City. The building cost over $7 million to build, approximately $200 million in today's currency. The interiors featured materials imported from European palaces. The craftsmanship represented the absolute peak of Gilded Age excess. Yet within 30 years of completion, the family decided the mansion was too expensive to maintain. The property taxes, the heating costs, the staff required to operate it, all exceeded what even the Vanderbilt fortune could justify. The building was sold, dismantled, and erased from Fifth Avenue. This is the story of how America's grandest mansion was built. The Vanderbilt family that commissioned it, the architects who designed it, the craftsmen who executed it, the fortune that paid for it, and the economic realities that made it impossible to save. If you're interested in Gilded Age architecture and the rise and fall of America's greatest fortunes, please consider subscribing. Building America's first great fortune. John Jacob Astor arrived in America in 1784. He was 21 years old. He carried musical instruments to sell, a small amount of capital, an ambition that would build the largest fortune in the young nation. Within 4 decades, he would transform fur trading profits into a real estate empire that would generate wealth for generations. Astor's initial business was fur. He established the American Fur Company in 1808. The company achieved near monopoly control over fur trading in the Great Lakes region and eventually the Pacific Northwest. Astor's methods were ruthless and effective. He undersold competitors, absorbed smaller operations, and leveraged political connections to secure favorable trading rights. The profits were substantial. By 1820, Astor's fur trading operations generated annual income exceeding $100,000, an enormous sum for the period. But Astor recognized that fur trading had limitations. Fashion changed, animal populations declined, competition from Canadian companies intensified. Around 1820, Astor began redirecting capital from fur into New York real estate. The strategy would prove far more profitable than fur ever was. Astor's real estate approach was systematic. He purchased farmland and undeveloped lots north of New York City's developed areas. Manhattan Island in the 1820s was densely settled only at its southern tip. Everything north of what is now 14th Street was largely farms and country estates. Astor bought this land cheaply, then waited for the city to expand northward. He understood that Manhattan's geography, an island with limited space, meant land values would rise inevitably as population increased. The purchases were substantial. Astor acquired dozens of properties. Some purchases were strategic parcels at crossroads or waterfronts. Others were large tracts of farmland. The investments required patient capital. Years might pass before development reached newly purchased land. But Astor could wait. The fur profits provided income while real estate appreciated. Astor's business model relied on ground leases rather than sales. When development reached his properties, he didn't sell the land. Instead, he leased it for 99 years. The leaseholder could build and operate whatever business or residence they wanted, but they paid Astor annual ground rent. At lease expiration, the land and any buildings reverted to the Astor family. This system meant Astor retained ownership while collecting steady income. The ground rents increased over time as the city grew and prospered. By Astor's death in 1848, his fortune totaled approximately $20 million. This made him the richest man in America. The fortune derived almost entirely from Manhattan real estate holdings. The fur business had been sold years earlier. The legacy was land and the income it generated. Astor's son, William Backhouse Astor, inherited the fortune and continued his father's strategy. William bought additional properties and managed existing holdings conservatively. He avoided speculation and maintained the ground lease system. Under William's management, the fortune grew steadily. Annual income from ground rents exceeded $1 million by the 1860s. When William Backhouse Astor died in 1875, the fortune was divided between his two sons. The elder son, John Jacob Astor III, received properties south of what became Times Square. The younger son, William Waldorf Astor's father, also named William, received properties in the northern sections. Each inheritance totaled approximately $25 million. The split created two Astor branches, both enormously wealthy but separate in their holdings and social positions. The fortune structure by the 1880s was clear. Hundreds of properties scattered across Manhattan, ground leases generating reliable annual income, securities and investments diversified beyond real estate. Total family wealth, considering both branches, exceeded $75 million. Compared to other contemporary fortunes, the Astors ranked with Vanderbilts in railroads and Rockefellers in oil. The transformation of New York's most fashionable street, Fifth Avenue, began as a dirt road running north through Manhattan farmland. By 1870, the avenue was paved with granite blocks. By 1880, it had become the most fashionable residential street in America. The transformation happened quickly. Within 2 decades, Fifth Avenue evolved from modest row houses to palaces that rivaled European aristocratic residences. The change accelerated after the Civil War. Industrial fortunes created a new class of wealthy families. Railroad magnates, financiers, merchants, and industrialists needed places to live that announced their success. Fifth Avenue provided the address, the wide street, the proximity to Central Park after 1876, and the concentration of other wealthy families made it the obvious choice for anyone with social ambitions. The architecture announced wealth unmistakably. Families built mansions rather than houses. The buildings were constructed from expensive materials. Limestone facades became standard. Marble, bronze, and imported details covered exteriors. The scale exceeded domestic necessity. Mansions contained 40, 50, 60 rooms. Ballrooms accommodated hundreds of guests. Dining rooms seated 30 or 40. The buildings were designed not just for living, but for displaying wealth and hosting society. Specific mansions marked the avenue's transformation. William Henry Vanderbilt built twin mansions at Fifth Avenue and 51st Street. The buildings, completed 1882, cost $3 million. The interiors featured art galleries, carved woodwork imported from Europe, and decorative excess that newspaper coverage described in detail. The Vanderbilt mansions established a standard that others tried to match or exceed. William Kissam Vanderbilt built his mansion at Fifth Avenue and 52nd Street, completed 1883, designed by Richard Morris Hunt. The building cost $3 million and deliberately referenced French chateaux. The mansion's completion party in March 1883 was covered extensively in newspapers. 1,200 guests attended. The costumes were elaborate. The event announced that the Vanderbilts had arrived socially and architecturally. Jay Gould built at Fifth Avenue and 47th Street. The mansion was smaller than the Vanderbilt houses, but architecturally distinguished. Other families followed: the Havemeyers, the Whitneys, the Belmonts, all built on Fifth Avenue. Each mansion competed architecturally with its neighbors. Size mattered, materials mattered, architectural pedigree mattered. Families hired prominent architects and demanded buildings that would impress. The social geography had hierarchies. Certain blocks were more prestigious than others. The stretch between 50th and 60th Streets became particularly fashionable. Proximity to Central Park added value. The park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, opened sections progressively through the 1860s and 70s. By 1876, the park was substantially complete. Mansions facing or near the park commanded premium positions. The 65th Street area, where William Waldorf Astor would build, sat at the northern edge of fashionable development in the 1880s. The location offered advantages. Central Park was immediately adjacent. The neighborhood was establishing itself but not yet fully built. Land costs were slightly lower than blocks further south. The area promised to appreciate as development pushed northward. What existed on Astor's future site before his purchase was typical for the area. Older residential buildings occupied the lots. These were not mansions, but substantial middle-class houses from the 1850s and 60s. The buildings were 3 or 4 stories, brick or brownstone construction, respectable but not grand. As Fifth Avenue's character changed, these older buildings became obsolete. Their owners sold to wealthier buyers who demolished them for new construction. Inheriting wealth without inheriting satisfaction, William Waldorf Astor was born March 31st, 1848, into circumstances that should have guaranteed happiness. He was the only son of John Jacob Astor III and Charlotte Augusta Gibbes. His grandfather William Backhouse Astor controlled the largest fortune in America. William Waldorf would inherit wealth, social position, and opportunities that few Americans could imagine. Yet he would spend much of his life profoundly dissatisfied. His childhood was privileged and controlled. The family lived in a mansion on Fifth Avenue and 33rd Street. Tutors provided early education. His parents emphasized culture, languages, and intellectual development. William Waldorf proved academically capable. He was fluent in multiple languages by adolescence. He read extensively, favoring history and literature. His personality developed as introverted and bookish. He preferred study to social activities. This would create problems later in a society that valued extroverted charm. William Waldorf attended Columbia College, then Columbia Law School. He graduated in 1875 and was admitted to the New York bar. The legal training was expected for someone of his class, though he never intended to practice seriously. The law degree provided credentials and intellectual foundation. His real inheritance was waiting, not earned through professional work. His personality traits became more defined in his 20s. He was serious, intellectually ambitious, and emotionally reserved. He lacked the social ease that made some wealthy men popular. He was awkward at parties, stiff in conversation, uncomfortable with the performative aspects of society. These traits would have mattered less if he'd been content with private life. But William Waldorf had political ambitions that his personality undermined. He entered politics in 1877, winning election to the New York State Assembly. He served 2 terms through 1879. The experience was frustrating. Legislative work involved compromise, coalition building, and social relationships. William Waldorf was poor at all 3. He introduced bills that went nowhere. He made few allies. He was earnest, but ineffective. The experience taught him that democratic politics required skills he lacked and temperament he didn't possess. Despite his legislative failures, President Chester Arthur appointed him minister to Italy in 1882. The diplomatic posting suited him better than domestic politics. He enjoyed Italy's culture, history, and art. He studied Italian Renaissance history and began collecting manuscripts and art. The posting allowed him to indulge his intellectual interests while representing his country. He performed adequately, though he made no major diplomatic achievements. The position ended in 1885, when Grover Cleveland's Democratic administration replaced Arthur's Republican appointees. Returning to America after the Italian posting, William Waldorf found himself in an uncomfortable social position. He was enormously wealthy. His father had died in 1890, leaving him approximately $50 million. But socially, he existed in his Aunt Caroline Astor's shadow. Caroline Astor, wife of his father's brother, dominated New York society as the Mrs. Astor. She decided who mattered socially. Her annual ball defined the social season. Her approval made or broke social aspirations. The rivalry between William Waldorf and Caroline Astor was partially about family branch competition. William Waldorf represented his father's line. Caroline represented her husband William Backhouse Astor Jr.'s line. Both branches were wealthy, both claimed the Astor name, but Caroline had social dominance. She was extroverted, socially skilled, and ruthless about protecting her position. William Waldorf was introverted, socially awkward, and resentful of her influence. The tensions were real and documented. William Waldorf believed he deserved recognition as head of the American Astor family. He was the eldest male of his generation. He controlled an enormous fortune. But Caroline maintained her position through personality and skill. She hosted better parties, cultivated better connections, and played social politics more effectively. William Waldorf's resentment grew throughout the 1880s and early 90s. Commissioning a monument on Fifth Avenue, William Waldorf Astor began considering a new residence in 1881. His family occupied a house on Fifth Avenue. inherited property that was substantial but not distinguished. The building was adequate, but didn't reflect his fortune or position. His growing family needed more space. His art collection required proper display areas. His library of rare books and manuscripts needed dedicated rooms. These practical needs combined with his desire for architectural statement that would announce his importance. The site selection process took months. William Waldorf examined various Fifth Avenue properties during 1881. He preferred locations near Central Park. The park proximity offered views, fresher air than Lower Manhattan, and association with the most fashionable neighborhood development. The blocks between 60th and 70th Streets were developing rapidly. Several suitable lots were available. He focused on 2 adjoining lots on the east side of Fifth Avenue between 64th and 65th Streets. The properties offered advantages. The combined lot measured approximately 100 feet on Fifth Avenue and 150 feet deep. This provided sufficient space for a substantial mansion and grounds. The location was directly across from Central Park. The neighborhood was establishing itself as fashionable, but wasn't yet fully developed, meaning land costs were slightly lower than blocks to the south. The properties were occupied by older residential buildings. These were typical brownstone and brick houses from the 1850s, 3 or 4 stories, middle-class dwellings that had become obsolete as Fifth Avenue's character changed. The owners were willing to sell. The existing buildings had no architectural significance. Demolishing them raised no concerns. Negotiations proceeded through the winter of 1881 and spring of 1882. William Waldorf's agents handled the discussions. The purchase price for both lots totaled approximately $500,000. This was substantial, but not exceptional for prime Fifth Avenue property. By 1882, comparable lots nearby sold for similar amounts. The purchase represented approximately 1% of William Waldorf's total fortune, a significant but manageable expenditure for the land alone. The transactions completed in stages. The first lot was acquired in February 1882. The second lot purchase closed in April 1882. Legal work establishing clear title and confirming boundaries took additional weeks. By May 1882, William Waldorf owned the complete site. Demolition of existing buildings began immediately. The demolition work was straightforward. The old houses were typical construction for their period. Brick-bearing walls, wooden interior structure, slate roofs. Demolition contractors stripped interiors first, salvaging anything valuable. Marble mantels, some woodwork, and fixtures were sold. The structural demolition followed. Workers took down walls carefully to avoid damaging adjacent properties. The debris was carted away. By late June 1882, the site was cleared to ground level. Foundations from old buildings were excavated and removed during July. William Waldorf defined his requirements for the new mansion during spring 1882. He wanted substantial size, but not ostentatious display. He preferred French Renaissance architectural style, which he considered dignified and historically appropriate. He required an art gallery with proper lighting for his growing collection of paintings and sculpture. He needed an extensive library with capacity for thousands of books and manuscripts. The family requirements were specific. Mary Astor needed reception rooms for entertaining. The mansion had to accommodate formal dinners for 30 or 40 guests. A ballroom was necessary for their daughter's eventual social debuts and major entertainments. The children needed nursery floor with bedrooms, schoolrooms, and spaces for governesses. The family required private sitting rooms, separate from public entertaining areas. Selecting the premier architect of Gilded Age America, Richard Morris Hunt, was born October 31st, 1827, in Brattleboro, Vermont. He died July 31st, 1905, leaving a legacy as the most influential American architect of the Gilded Age. By 1882, when William Waldorf Astor approached him, Hunt had established himself as the preferred architect for America's wealthiest families. His credentials, training, and completed works made him the obvious choice for anyone commissioning a Fifth Avenue mansion. Hunt's training distinguished him from other American architects. He was the first American to study at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He enrolled in 1846 and studied until 1853. The École was the world's most prestigious architectural school. The training emphasized classical principles, rigorous drawing, careful composition, and historically informed design. Students learned by copying historical examples, then applying those principles to new buildings. The education was demanding and produced architects who understood architectural tradition thoroughly. The Beaux-Arts approach influenced everything Hunt designed. His buildings referenced historical styles, particularly French Renaissance and Italian Renaissance architecture. He understood classical proportions, symmetry, and ornamental vocabulary. His designs were scholarly in their references, but adapted to American circumstances and client needs. The combination of European training and American practice made him uniquely qualified to design for wealthy clients who wanted buildings suggesting cultivation and historical legitimacy. Hunt returned to America in 1855 and established his practice in New York. Early commissions included the 10th Street Studio Building, residences for wealthy clients, and institutional buildings. His reputation grew steadily through the 1860s and 70s. By the early 1880s, he was designing major projects for the Vanderbilt family and other prominent wealthy families. His completed works by 1882 included several significant buildings. The Tribune Building in New York, completed 1875, was an early skyscraper demonstrating Hunt's ability to design large commercial structures. The Lenox Library, completed 1877, showed his skill with institutional architecture, but his reputation rested primarily on residential work for wealthy clients. Hunt had designed houses for William K. Vanderbilt and other wealthy New Yorkers. The Vanderbilt House at 5th Avenue and 52nd Street, completed 1883, would become his most visible work when William Waldorf approached him. That commission was ongoing during 1882. Hunt's design referenced French chateaux, particularly Blois, adapted to an urban 5th Avenue lot. The building would cost $3 million and establish Hunt as the architect who could satisfy even the most demanding wealthy clients. William Waldorf Astor approached Hunt in summer 1882. The initial meeting occurred at Hunt's office on Broadway. Hunt was 54 years old, at the peak of his abilities and reputation. William Waldorf was 34, newly in control of his inheritance, and determined to build something distinguished. The age difference and Hunt's established reputation meant the architect held considerable authority in the relationship. The early consultations established the project parameters. William Waldorf described his requirements: substantial mansion, French Renaissance style, approximately 90,000 square feet, art gallery, extensive library, appropriate entertaining spaces, family quarters for growing children, full-service accommodations. Hunt listened, asked questions, and made preliminary notes. He understood immediately that this would be a major commission. Hunt's design philosophy emphasized that buildings should express their purpose and their owner's cultivated taste. A mansion for someone of William Waldorf's wealth and social position required architectural dignity. The style should suggest historical legitimacy and cultural sophistication. French Renaissance architecture offered the appropriate associations. The style referenced 16th-century French chateau, buildings associated with aristocratic culture and refined taste. A mansion designed for dignity rather than display Richard Morris Hunt's approved design for the Astor Mansion reflected his mature architectural philosophy. The building would be substantial without being overwhelming. It would reference European architectural tradition without copying specific buildings. It would announce wealth and cultivation through proportion, materials, and craftsmanship rather than through excessive ornamentation. The design balanced William Waldorf Astor's requirements for a distinguished residence with Hunt's belief that architecture should express restrained dignity. The architectural style was French Renaissance Revival. This meant the building referenced 16th-century French chateau, particularly examples from the Loire Valley. The style suggested historical legitimacy and aristocratic culture. French Renaissance architecture emphasized symmetry, classical proportions, vertical emphasis through towers and steep roofs, and carefully organized ornamental details. Hunt adapted these principles to an urban 5th Avenue lot and American building practices. The exterior walls would be constructed primarily of limestone. Hunt specified Indiana limestone for most of the facade. Indiana limestone was quarried from formations in southern Indiana and had become the preferred stone for major American buildings. The stone was relatively uniform in color, ranging from light gray to buff. It carved well, allowing detailed ornamental work. It weathered predictably and maintained its appearance better than many other building stones. The limestone would give the mansion a light, refined appearance different from the darker brownstone common in earlier New York residential architecture. Architectural terracotta provided ornamental details. Terracotta is fired clay molded into decorative shapes. The material allowed more intricate ornamental work than carved stone at lower cost. Hunt used terracotta for window surrounds, decorative panels, and elaborate details at the roofline. The terracotta was glazed to match the limestone color, creating visual unity while allowing elaborate ornamentation. The building dimensions were substantial. The Fifth Avenue facade measured 100 feet wide. The building extended 150 feet back toward Madison Avenue. The height reached approximately 70 feet from sidewalk to roof peak. This was the maximum practical height given construction technology and Fifth Avenue's building conventions. The mansion occupied virtually the entire lot, with minimal setbacks from property lines. The massing created visual interest through variation. The central section of the Fifth Avenue facade projected slightly forward, creating a pavilion that emphasized the main entrance. Corner pavilions at either end of the facade also projected, breaking the wall plane and adding three-dimensional depth. These projections were subtle, measured in feet rather than dramatic setbacks, but they prevented the facade from appearing as a flat wall. The roof was critical to the design's character. A steep slate roof, typical of French Renaissance architecture, capped the building. The roof pitch was approximately 45 degrees, much steeper than typical American residential roofs. Dormer windows punctured the roof surface, dormer roofs, providing light and ventilation to fourth-floor rooms and creating visual rhythm along the roof line. The dormers had elaborately carved surrounds and small pediments, contributing ornamental detail at the building's top. The facade organization followed classical principles. The ground floor, partially below grade, was treated as a base. Small windows and minimal ornamental detail characterized this level, which housed service functions. The first floor, the piano nobile or principal floor, received emphasis through larger windows, more elaborate surrounds, and classical detailing. The second and third floors stepped down in visual importance. Their windows were progressively smaller and simpler. This hierarchy followed classical precedent, where the most important floor received the most architectural emphasis. Raising the structure, 1882 to 1884. Construction of the Astor Mansion began in early spring 1883. The site had been cleared the previous summer. The winter months allowed Hunt's office to complete detailed construction drawings. By March, contractors were ready to begin foundation work. The construction would proceed through 2 building seasons, completing the exterior structure by fall 1884. The foundation work began with excavation. Workers dug down approximately 25 feet below street level to reach bedrock. Manhattan's bedrock is schist, a metamorphic rock that provides excellent foundation support. The excavation required removing thousands of cubic yards of soil and rock. Horse-drawn wagons hauled the material away. The excavation work took approximately 6 weeks, finishing in late April 1883. The bedrock surface was irregular and required leveling in some areas. Workers used hand tools and explosives to create a relatively level surface for the foundation. The foundation itself consisted of granite blocks laid directly on bedrock. These massive stones, weighing several tons each, were positioned with extreme care. Mistakes at the foundation level would compromise everything built above. The granite came from quarries in New England, transported to New York by ship and then by wagon to the construction site. The foundation walls rose from the bedrock to just below ground level. These walls were thick, approximately 3 feet, constructed of granite blocks, mortared together. The foundation had to support the entire weight of the building above. The walls also had to resist lateral pressure from the surrounding soil. The foundation work was methodical and time-consuming. By early summer 1883, the foundation was substantially complete. Steel frame erection began in June 1883. Steel frame construction was relatively new technology in the early 1880s. Previous buildings relied on thick masonry-bearing walls to support upper floors and roofs. Steel frames allowed thinner exterior walls because the structural loads were carried by the steel skeleton rather than the masonry. This permitted larger windows and more flexible interior arrangements. The steel came from mills in Pennsylvania. The Carnegie Steel Company or similar manufacturers produced the beams, columns, and connecting elements to specifications provided by Hunt's structural engineers. The steel arrived at the site by railroad, then was moved by wagon the final distance. Each piece was marked to indicate its position in the structure. Workers assembled the frame like a large three-dimensional puzzle. Erecting the steel frame required skilled iron workers. These were specialized craftsmen who understood how to position steel members, align bolt holes, and secure connections. The work was dangerous. Men worked at height on temporary scaffold, steel. Beams were heavy and unwieldy. Accidents occurred, though detailed records of injuries during the Astor Mansion construction don't survive. The dangerous nature of ironwork was accepted as normal for the period. The steel frame rose floor by floor through summer and fall 1883. Ground floor framing was erected first, then first floor, continuing upward. Each floor level required horizontal beams supported by vertical columns. The connections between members were bolted. Riveting, which would become standard practice within a few years, was not yet universal. The frame was designed to be rigid, resisting wind loads and supporting all the building's weight. Masonry work began, while steel erection continued. The limestone facade would be supported by the steel frame but had to be installed carefully. The limestone came from quarries near Salem, Indiana. Salem limestone, also called Indiana limestone, was ideal for building. The stone was relatively soft when first quarried, making it easy to carve. After exposure to air, it hardened. The color was uniform, ranging from buff to light gray. The stone weathered well and maintained its appearance for decades. Finishing the rooms with European materials. The exterior structure stood complete by winter 1884. The real work was only beginning. Finishing the interior of the Astor Mansion would require another year, and the skills of craftsmen recruited from across Europe and America. The scale was unprecedented. Over 100 rooms needed decoration, paneling, plastering, and furnishing. Each space demanded different materials, different techniques, different expertise. Richard Morris Hunt had designed the rooms. Executing his vision required specialists. The Herter brothers firm, already established as premier decorators for wealthy New York families, took primary responsibility for coordinating the interior work. The firm had decorated Vanderbilt houses and other major residences. Christian Herter understood how to manage complex projects requiring multiple craftsmen working simultaneously. The Herter brothers would oversee everything from wall treatments to furniture placement, but even their established firm needed help. The mansion's ambition exceeded what any single firm could accomplish alone. European craftsmen arrived throughout winter 1884 and spring 1885. Italian plasterers came to execute the ornamental ceiling work. The ballroom ceiling required elaborately molded plaster panels with gilded details. The entrance hall needed coffered ceiling with decorative rosettes. Multiple reception rooms required plaster cornices, ceiling medallions, and ornamental details. The work was done by hand using techniques learned through apprenticeships in Italy. Each section had to be formed, installed, and finished while wet. The plasterers worked on scaffolding, lying on their backs for hours, shaping and smoothing the wet material overhead. The position was uncomfortable and physically demanding. The work required both strength and delicate touch. Too much pressure damaged the soft plaster. Insufficient shaping left rough surfaces. French woodcarvers worked on the paneling for the library and dining room. The wood itself came from Europe, mahogany from Honduras, oak from England, walnut from France. Each wood was selected for specific qualities of grain, color, and workability. The carved panels were created in workshops, then installed in the mansion. The carvers shaped decorative elements using hand tools, floral motifs, classical patterns, geometric designs. Each required days of careful work. Mistakes meant starting over with fresh wood, wasting expensive material and time. The carved panels were fitted precisely into the walls, creating seamless surfaces that appeared as single continuous pieces rather than assembled sections. The library paneling was particularly elaborate. The two-story space, required mahogany panels extending 20 feet high on some walls. The gallery level needed railings and balustrades carved to match the wall panels. Built-in bookcases were integrated into the paneling design. Each shelf, each vertical divider, each decorative element had to be carved, finished, and installed. The woodwork in the library alone required 6 months of concentrated effort by multiple craftsmen working simultaneously. The marble work required stone masons familiar with imported materials. Marble came from quarries in Italy and France. The entrance hall received white Carrara marble for floors and walls. This marble, quarried near Carrara, Italy, had been used since Roman times. The material was expensive but considered the finest white marble available. Other rooms received different stones. Colored marbles from French quarries provided accent details. The dining room fireplace was carved from a single block of rose-colored marble. The grand staircase had marble treads imported from Italy. Moving into the Fifth Avenue Mansion, 1885. The Astor Mansion was substantially complete by November 1885. Final inspections occurred throughout October. Hunt's office reviewed every room, checking that executed work matched his specifications. The Herter brothers conducted their own inspections, ensuring decorative elements were properly installed and finished. William Waldorf walked through the completed building multiple times, noting any items requiring correction or adjustment. By early November, the punch list of remaining minor items was short enough to allow occupancy. The move-in process began in mid-November 1885. Furniture was delivered and positioned according to plans prepared by the Herter brothers. Some furniture came from the family's previous residence. Other pieces were newly made by cabinet makers working to Herter brothers' designs. The ballroom received gilded chairs and settees upholstered in silk damask. The dining room got a table capable of seating 40 guests with matching chairs. The library received leather-upholstered furniture arranged for comfortable reading and conversation. The family relocated from their previous Fifth Avenue residence in late November. William Waldorf, Mary, and their 4 children moved into rooms that had been prepared for weeks. Staff had cleaned, arranged furniture, hung curtains, and made beds. The children, ranging in age from 5 to 16, each had bedrooms on the 3rd floor. The nursery was equipped for the younger children. Governesses and tutors occupied adjacent rooms, maintaining supervision and continuing education routines with minimal disruption. Household organization required careful planning. The staff numbered approximately 35 people by the time the family occupied the mansion. The butler held the highest rank among servants. He supervised footmen, managed wine storage, oversaw formal service, and maintained household standards. The housekeeper managed female staff, including ladies' maids, housemaids, and laundry workers. The chef commanded the kitchen, directing undercooks, kitchen maids, and scullery workers. The hierarchy was strict and clearly understood. Staff quarters on the 4th floor had been furnished simply but adequately. Each servant had an individual room, unusual luxury compared to many households where servants shared rooms. The rooms were small, approximately 10 by 12 feet, but included a bed, dresser, chair, and washstand. The servants' dining room on the ground floor provided space for staff meals. The servants ate separately from the family at different times, with their own food preparation, though using ingredients from the same stores. Daily operations established routines quickly. The household woke early. Servants rose by 5:30 or 6 in the morning. Kitchen staff began preparing breakfast. Housemaids cleaned public rooms before the family appeared. The family breakfast was served at 8. William Waldorf typically ate in the dining room while reading newspapers. Mary joined him most mornings. The children ate in the nursery with their governess. Loss and the beginning of withdrawal. 1894. Mary Dahlgren Paul Astor had been the stabilizing force in William Waldorf's life since their marriage in 1878. She managed the household. She fulfilled social obligations that William Waldorf found burdensome. She raised their children. She softened his difficult personality and made him more acceptable to New York society than he would have been alone. Her role extended beyond typical wife and mother. She was essential mediator between William Waldorf's antisocial tendencies and the social expectations of their class. The family occupied the Fifth Avenue mansion comfortably through the late 1880s and early 1890s. Mary hosted dinners, receptions, and occasional balls. She maintained the social connections necessary for the family's position. The children grew under her supervision. Waldorf, the eldest, reached his teens. Pauline required preparation for eventual social debut. The younger children needed education and guidance. Mary managed all of this while maintaining the enormous household and tolerating her husband's increasingly critical views of American society. Mary's health began declining in 1893. The exact nature of her illness remains unclear in surviving records. Contemporary accounts describe a gradual weakening rather than acute disease. She tired easily. She lost weight. Her energy diminished. Physicians were consulted. The best medical practitioners in New York examined her, but 1890 medical knowledge had severe limitations. Diagnoses were often uncertain. Treatments were largely ineffective. Mary continued her duties as long as possible. She hosted smaller gatherings when she lacked strength for large entertainments. She supervised the household from her rooms when she couldn't move through the mansion as before. She maintained correspondence and managed social obligations that couldn't be delayed or delegated, but her decline was visible to those who knew her. Friends noted her appearance. Society gossip discussed her health. The household staff worried about her condition and its implications for their employment. By late 1893, Mary was largely confined to her bedroom suite on the second floor. The rooms became her world. Physicians visited regularly. Nurses attended her constantly. The household adjusted its routines to accommodate her illness. Meals were sent to her rooms. Visitors were limited. The children's access to their mother was controlled to avoid tiring her. William Waldorf spent more time with her than his usual habits suggested, sitting with her, reading to her, managing correspondence she could no longer handle. Mary Astor died on February 20th, 1894. She was 36 years old. The death occurred in her bedroom in the mansion. Family members were present. Her physician documented the death. The immediate cause was recorded as heart failure, a CHO, common notation when exact causes were uncertain. The underlying illness that weakened her over months remained unnamed in death, as it had been in life. Abandoning New York for England, 1896, William Waldorf Astor announced his decision in spring 1896. He would leave America permanently and relocate to England with his 4 children. The announcement surprised few people who knew him well. His dissatisfaction with American life had been evident for years. Mary's death removed his primary reason for remaining. His Anglophilia and contempt for American democracy had intensified throughout the 1890s. The departure was logical conclusion to years of growing alienation. The practical arrangements required months. William Waldorf owned substantial American property. His Manhattan real estate holdings generated annual income exceeding $1 million. He owned the Fifth Avenue mansion and its contents. He had securities, bank accounts, and business relationships throughout New York. Simply abandoning everything wasn't practical or desirable. He needed to establish management structures, allowing him to maintain American assets while living abroad. He appointed agents to manage his real estate portfolio. Lawyers and business managers would collect rents, pay taxes, maintain properties, and handle legal matters. The arrangement was standard for wealthy property owners with holdings in multiple locations. The agents received instructions and authority to act on William Waldorf's behalf. They would communicate by mail and telegraph. The system was cumbersome compared to direct management, but workable. The Fifth Avenue mansion presented particular challenges. The building was too valuable to simply abandon, but had no obvious purpose if the family wasn't occupying it. Selling was considered, but rejected. The mansion was worth millions, but finding a buyer who wanted a house of such scale was difficult. Most wealthy families built their own mansions to their specifications rather than buying existing ones. The mansion's value lay primarily in its land rather than the building itself. William Waldorf decided to maintain the mansion, but not occupy it. Staff would be reduced to minimal caretaking level. The building would be heated sufficiently to prevent damage, but not maintained for comfort. The furnishings would remain. The art collection would be partially shipped to England, but some pieces would stay. The mansion would essentially be preserved in place, available if needed, but not actively used. The staff reduction was significant. The household of 35 employees would shrink to approximately 5 or 6 caretakers. The butler, housekeeper, and most servants were dismissed with severance payments. A few long-serving employees were retained as caretakers. Their responsibilities would be security, basic cleaning, heating in winter, and preventing deterioration. The reduction saved substantial annual expense, but maintained the building in theoretically occupiable condition. William Waldorf selected England because it suited his preferences and prejudices. He admired British aristocratic culture. He believed hereditary social hierarchies were superior to American democratic leveling. British society offered established order that American society lacked. Britain had monarchy, titles, traditions, and social structures he considered more civilized than American alternatives. 3 decades of absence and accumulating costs. The Astor Mansion stood on Fifth Avenue for 29 years after William Waldorf's departure. The building was maintained but essentially unoccupied from 1896 until its demolition in 1926. Those 3 decades transformed the mansion from recently completed residence into obsolete white elephant. The neighborhood changed around it. The economics of Fifth Avenue shifted fundamentally. The building became increasingly expensive liability rather than valuable asset. The caretaker staff maintained basic functions. 5 or 6 employees remained after the household reduction. A head caretaker lived in servants' quarters and supervised the others. The caretakers walked through rooms periodically, checking for water leaks, pest infestations, or structural problems. They cleaned enough to prevent excessive dust accumulation but didn't maintain the standards of an occupied residence. They secured windows and doors against intruders. They checked mechanical systems for failures. Heating remained the largest operational expense. The building had to be kept above freezing in winter, or water pipes would freeze and burst. Frozen pipes could cause catastrophic damage when they thawed. The heating system operated at minimal levels, keeping interior temperatures around 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. This was adequate to prevent pipe damage, but far below comfort levels. The coal consumption decreased significantly compared to occupied conditions, but remained substantial. The building consumed perhaps 3 to 4 tons of coal weekly during cold weather instead of the 10 tons required when the family lived there. Property taxes continued regardless of occupancy. The mansion was assessed based on its land value and building value. The land value increased steadily as Fifth Avenue commercial development intensified. The building value depreciated slowly, but the total assessment generally increased. The annual property tax bill was approximately $40,000 in the late 1890s. By the 1910s, the assessment had increased to approximately $60,000 annually. By the early 1920s, the taxes approached $100,000 per year. The tax burden reflected Manhattan real estate's appreciation. The Fifth Avenue location was increasingly valuable for commercial purposes. Retail shops were moving northward along the avenue. Office buildings were replacing residences. The land under the mansion was worth millions by the 1920s, but the building itself was worthless for commercial purposes. Its value existed only as residence, and nobody wanted to buy or rent a mansion of such scale. Insurance costs increased as the building aged and remained unoccupied. Insurance companies considered empty buildings greater risks than occupied ones. Unoccupied buildings were vulnerable to vandalism, fire from vagrants, and undetected maintenance problems. The annual insurance premiums increased from approximately $3,000 in the late 1890s to $6,000 or $7,000 by the 1920s. Utility costs were minimal. Electricity service was maintained for the caretaker's use and for minimal lighting. Water service continued for basic plumbing function and fire protection. Gas service was discontinued after William Waldorf's departure since the building wasn't being used. The total utility costs were perhaps $500 to $1,000 annually, negligible compared to taxes and heating. Why saving the mansion was never seriously considered. The question of preserving the Astor Mansion was never seriously debated because the economics made preservation impossible. By 1925, the building had negative economic value. The land was worth millions. The building reduced that value by requiring demolition expense before the land could be used. No preservation alternative existed that would have made economic sense to the owners or any potential buyer. The property tax assessment for 1925 totaled approximately $95,000. The assessment reflected both land and building value. The land was assessed at approximately $3 million. This valuation was based on comparable Fifth Avenue sales and the property's commercial development potential. The building was assessed at approximately $500,000, but this building valuation was theoretical. Nobody would pay $500,000 for the mansion. The building's only real value was salvage value of materials after demolition. The annual carrying costs were itemized clearly in reports prepared by Waldorf Astor's American agents. Property taxes totaled $95,000. Insurance cost approximately $7,000 annually. Heating during winter months cost approximately $8,000. Maintenance and repairs averaged $6,000 yearly. Caretaker salaries totaled approximately $9,000. The total annual expense was approximately $125,000. The opportunity cost calculation added to the economic burden. $3 million invested conservatively in bonds or securities would yield approximately $150,000 annually at 5% return. The actual land was producing no income. The foregone investment return was real economic loss. Combining the actual carrying costs of $125,000 with the foregone income of $150,000 produced a total annual economic burden of $275,000. The commercial zoning changes that had occurred over preceding decades made residential use legally problematic. Fifth Avenue in the 60s had been rezoned to permit commercial development. Existing residential buildings were allowed to continue under grandfather clauses, but new residential construction was not permitted. This meant the mansion's highest and best use was no longer residential. The property's value derived from commercial development potential, not residential use. The demolished site could accommodate a substantial commercial building. The zoning permitted buildings of 12 to 15 stories on the site. An apartment building, office building, or mixed-use structure could be constructed. The completed building would generate rental income far exceeding any residential use. Developers calculated that a properly designed commercial building on the site could produce annual rental income of $300,000 or more. This made the land extremely valuable, but made the existing mansion an obstacle. Donation to institutions was explored and rejected. Waldorf Astor's agents approached museums, universities, and cultural organizations. Could any institution use the mansion for their purposes? The Metropolitan Museum of Art was contacted. Columbia University was approached. Various cultural organizations were queried. All declined. The reasons were consistent. The operating costs were too high. The location was wrong for institutional purposes. The building's design didn't suit institutional needs. Most importantly, no institution wanted the ongoing financial burden. Dismantling Fifth Avenue's empty palace, Nanti Take Common State Bespech, 1926. The demolition contract was awarded to Harris & Son, a New York wrecking company, with experience demolishing large buildings. The contract was signed in early 1926. The firm agreed to demolish the mansion, remove all debris, and deliver the site cleared to grade level, ready for new construction. The contract price was approximately $60,000. This would be offset partially by salvage revenue from materials that could be sold. The salvage operations began before structural demolition. Salvageable materials had potential value. The approach was systematic. Interior elements were removed first, working from top floors downward. The removable items included anything that could be sold to dealers in architectural antiques or directly to buyers seeking materials for other projects. The furniture had been sold at auction several months earlier. The auction occurred in fall 1925 after the sale was finalized, but before demolition began. The auction was held at the mansion itself. Potential buyers walked through rooms examining furnishings in place. The auction catalog listed hundreds of items: chairs, tables, beds, cabinets, mirrors, carpets, draperies, all were auctioned. The total auction proceeds were modest, approximately $35,000. The furnishings sold for a fraction of their original cost. Tastes had changed. The elaborate Gilded Age style was no longer fashionable. Buyers wanted bargains rather than paying premium for historical association. The The architectural salvage focused on items with resale value. Carved wooden paneling from the library and dining room was carefully removed. The mahogany panels were sold to dealers, who would resell them to buyers renovating other buildings or collectors wanting historical materials. The woodwork sold for approximately $15,000 total. This was fraction of the original installation cost, but represented the panel's salvage value. The marble mantles from major rooms were removed intact. Marble fireplaces had consistent salvage value. The carved mantles could be installed in other buildings. Dealers purchased them for resale. The approximately dozen marble mantles from principal rooms sold for a total of $8,000 to $10,000. Some mantles from lesser rooms were broken up. The marble sold as scrap. The grand staircase carved oak was dismantled carefully. The newel posts, balusters, and handrail sections had architectural interest. The staircase components sold to dealers for approximately $5,000. Some pieces were purchased by collectors. Others were eventually installed in different buildings where they exist today, divorced from their original context. The bronze railings and decorative metalwork were removed. Bronze had scrap value based on metal content, regardless of artistic merit. The railings, grills, and fixtures were sold to metal dealers. Some pieces were melted down for the bronze. Others were resold intact. The total bronze salvage value was approximately $8,000. What the loss meant and why it happened. The Astor Mansion's demolition in 1926 eliminated one of Richard Morris Hunt's significant residential works. The building represented mature Gilded Age architecture at substantial scale. The craftsmanship was excellent. The materials were expensive and carefully selected. The design balanced grandeur with relative restraint. Yet the mansion lasted barely 40 years before economic forces made its destruction inevitable. Understanding why this happened illuminates the relationship between wealth, architecture, and urban economics. The architectural loss was significant but not catastrophic. Hunt designed numerous buildings during his career. Many survive. The Breakers in Newport remains intact and open to public. Biltmore in North Carolina survives as tourist destination. Other Hunt buildings exist in various conditions. The Astor Mansion was important but not unique. Its demolition removed one example from Hunt's portfolio, but didn't erase his architectural legacy. The specific qualities lost deserve documentation. The mansion demonstrated Hunt's ability to adapt French Renaissance precedents to American urban conditions. The limestone facade was carefully proportioned and detailed. The interior spaces were arranged logically. The grand staircase was architecturally distinguished. The library, with its two-story space and gallery level, was impressive. The ballroom decoration represented high-quality plasterwork and gilding. These elements were lost permanently when the building was demolished. The salvaged architectural elements scattered widely. Some carved woodwork panels ended up in museums documenting Gilded Age interiors. Metropolitan Museum of Art acquired some decorative elements, though not specifically from the Astor Mansion. Brooklyn Museum has Gilded Age room installations that include salvaged materials from various demolished mansions. Some Astor Mansion elements may be among these, though specific provenance is difficult to establish. Private collectors and dealers acquired salvaged materials. Marble mantles were installed in other buildings. Bronze railings found new uses. Carved doors and woodwork were incorporated into renovations and new construction. These elements survive divorced from their original context. They document craftsmanship, but not the architectural whole they once composed. Photographs document the mansion's appearance. Architectural photographers recorded the building's exterior and some interiors. These images survive in archives and libraries. The New York Historical Society holds photographs. The New York Public Library has images. The Museum of the City of New York documents Fifth Avenue's architectural history, including the Astor Mansion. These photographs allow scholars and interested viewers to see what was lost. But photographs cannot replace the physical experience of the building. The broader pattern of Fifth Avenue mansion demolitions was well established by 1926. The Astor Mansion was not first and not last. The pattern began in the 1910s and accelerated through the 20s and 30s. Most Fifth Avenue mansions between 30th and 70th Streets were eventually demolished. The few survivors were exceptional cases with specific circumstances allowing preservation. The mansion also demonstrates that architecture serves purposes beyond aesthetics. Buildings must function economically, socially, and practically. The Astor Mansion functioned well when occupied by family using it for intended residential and social purposes. When abandoned, it had no function. The building's architectural quality couldn't create purpose. Without purpose, the building became liability regardless of its design excellence. The $7 million construction cost represents approximately $150 million in current currency. The investment was enormous by any standard, yet the building lasted barely 40 years before demolition. The annual carrying cost during 30 years of vacancy totaled more than original construction cost. The financial loss was catastrophic. Even unlimited wealth could not make the economics work without purpose and commitment. The Astor fortune survived the building it created. Money, properly invested and managed, persists across generations and geography. Buildings are fixed in place and require ongoing resources. The fortune moved to England with William Waldorf and continued supporting his descendants. The building remained in New York, became burdened, and was demolished. The contrast illustrates different natures of wealth and architecture. The Fifth Avenue mansion, too expensive to save, proved that expense is relative. The construction expense was affordable to William Waldorf Astor. The maintenance expense was manageable while the family occupied the building. The carrying costs during vacancy became expensive relative to benefit received. The demolition became necessary when the expense could no longer be justified against any return. Expense is always measured against utility and value. The Astor fortune's $7 million loss was not the construction cost. The loss was the total investment in land, construction, and 30 years of carrying costs minus the final sale price. The loss exceeded 70% of total investment. The fortune absorbed this loss and continued, but the building was gone permanently. Financial losses can be recovered. Demolished architecture cannot be rebuilt. The loss of buildings is absolute and final. If you found this exploration of the Astor Mansion's construction and destruction valuable, please consider subscribing for more documentaries about Gilded Age architecture and the economics that determined which buildings survived. The story of this mansion, like many architectural stories, is ultimately about choices, resources, and the intersection of human decisions with economic forces. Thank you for watching.